Well, he's nobody's fool, so he's playing it cool as can be. He'll give it a whirl.
Hello again, everyone. This is Steve Callis speaking of sports, and I'm here with Carlos with a K Ortiz. And we're here, unfortunately, to do another eulogy, this time for the late, great Bob Gibson. Now, Bob Gibson died on Friday, October 2nd, 2020. We're taping this the next day. He died of pancreatic cancer. He was 84 years old. Before I throw it to Carlos, I just want to give you one interesting stat. The date of his death was the 52nd anniversary of Game 1 of the 1968 World Series, Cardinals and Tigers. Bob Gibson, as always, when the Cardinals were in the World Series in the 60s, started Game 1, started Game 7. We'll talk about that later. But on this date, on October 2nd, 1968, he struck out 17 Tigers. Still to this day, the major league record for strikeouts in the World Series game. And he would go on to strike out 35 Tigers in that World Series. And that, too, is still a World Series record. So I'll throw it over to Carlos for stats and thoughts on the great Bob Gibson.
So with Bob Gibson, if any of you are unfamiliar with his career, he played 17 major league seasons, all for the St. Louis Cardinals, which is difficult to know as a Chicago Cubs fan. But fandom aside, you do recognize the greatness that Gibson had. Only one of 25 pitchers to win the National League MVP. He won it in 1968. And think about that. Positional players overwhelmingly win the most valuable player in either the American or the National League. So we have about 168 MVP awards that were given out in our history. 25 have only been pitchers. So that really speaks to the season that Gibson had. One of the greatest seasons ever. He was 22-9 with a 1.12 ERA over 34 starts, 28 complete games. Something you don't see anymore with analytics. Most pitchers don't want to see the third order in the lineup. So out of those 28 games, 13 shutouts and 268 strikeouts for a year. Absolutely phenomenal. Well-deserving to win the MVP of that season. He was an 8-time All-Star. He won the Cy Young 2 times, 2-time World Series MVP in 64 and 67. And his overall numbers for his career were 251 wins. Again, it's a staggering amount. We'll probably never see another 250 to 300 win pitcher again. Lifetime ERA at 2.91. And the stat that I love the most, because I've always been a guy who appreciates power, 3,117 strikeouts over his career. Gibson, 17 seasons for the Cardinals. He was an absolute machine, one of the best pitchers in the game. It's sad that Steve, that we continue to do these videos, but I guess the only solace that I can take out of this is the fact that it's not COVID-19 related, or we've been seeing too much of that lately. So, Bob Gibson, we send our thoughts and prayers to his family, as always, and just what a remarkable, distinguished career.
Yeah, I got some interesting things to say about Bob Gibson. Before his distinguished career, he was the first African-American basketball player at Creighton University. He was a great basketball player, according to many. Averaged over 20 points a game for Creighton, still to this day, 4th on their all-time scoring list. And more interestingly, after Creighton, where he played baseball, but they only played like 20 games a year, so he said he only pitched a couple times, he went and played one season for the Harlem Globetrotters. And not only did he play for the Harlem Globetrotters in the 1957-58 season, his roommate was Meadowlark Lemon. And I have a quote from Meadowlark Lemon from many years ago. He's passed away as well. But here's a quote from Meadowlark Lemon, maybe the greatest Globetrotter ever, certainly the most well-known. And here's what he said about his roommate, Bob Gibson. Quote, "I thought Bob was the better basketball player than a baseball player. I think Bob could have played with any NBA team. He was that good." Now, Gibson was only 6'1". They said he could jump out of the building. He was a great athlete. He was a high school track star. And the reason I mention that is because he was also a 9-time Gold Glove winner as a pitcher. And you got to be a great athlete back in those days, getting off to cover a bunt, et cetera, et cetera. A few other just thoughts on Gibson, separate from stats. Maybe the most intense competitor ever. I know he had a reputation as a headhunter. I don't think that's true when you look at the hit by pitch numbers, but he did often say, "I own the inside of the plate." He was one of those guys, Drysdale, Koufax, Marichal, Bob Gibson had a great fastball and a wonderful slider, and that I thought was really in a big spot, his best out pitch. So he was incredibly tough. Beat the Yankees in '64, was 2-1 in the series, including Game 7. Was actually winning like 7-3, and back in those days, and you know this, Carlos, they kind of gutted things out, and there was a conversation, should he come out of the game for Ray Sadecki, another starter? And Gibson said, no, I'm up 4 runs. I won't give up 4 runs. He did actually give up 2 runs in that ninth inning, and home runs to guys like Phil Linz and Tom Tresh, for you old timers, not Yankees, but not power Yankees. But he won that Game 7. The next, in '67, he would throw 3 complete game victories against the Boston Red Sox. I mean, just staggering stuff. And in '68, he would lose Game 7 to Mickey Lolich and the Tigers. But in those 3 World Series, he was incredible. His all-time record in the World Series, which makes him, to me, one of the greatest pitchers ever in World Series history, 7-2. He lost his first game in '64. He lost the last game in '68. He won 7 World Series in between, all complete games, 1.89 ERA. I mean, the numbers are just wacky. I should also mention, because I missed this before, in 1999, he was, not surprisingly, elected to the All-Century team in baseball. The other thing I wanted to mention to you, and I wonder if you ever thought of this when you're looking at this, when he was 22-9 with a 1.12 ERA in 1968, you know, that was the year of the pitcher. And they lowered the mound partly because of Gibson's season more than anyone. They lowered the mound from 15 inches to 10 inches. And I don't think people today realize what a big difference that makes, because I pitched on a few high mounds in my career in college and semi-pro, and it made a big difference just from your speed and your angle over the top. And that was a very telling change, I thought. But here's what I found out. I never understood, and I would say it to you, how did Gibson lose 9 games with a 1.12 ERA? And here's apparently the answer. The Cardinals only averaged 2.8 runs a game in 1968 offensively. That's not very good run support. And the average that year was around 3.7, 3.8 runs per game. And some statisticians eventually analyzed the complete every game of Gibson's year, because as you said, 13 shutouts. I mean, led the majors. That was ridiculous. They don't even have 13 shutouts in the major leagues a year anymore. You know, if they have like 5 or 6, it's a lot. But they said if the Cardinals were able to score 4 runs per game in 1968 for Bob Gibson, and I don't know the algorithms or anything, but they said if they had scored 4 runs a game, which was just a little over the major league average, he would have been 31-2, which kind of would have made more sense, more sense to me just the way he was. The other thing I wanted to just talk briefly about, so in 1960, well, let me step back first. Gibson preferred basketball to baseball. He admitted all through his baseball career and later that he was like a basketball guy. And the Minneapolis Lakers, the forerunners of the Los Angeles Lakers in the late 50s, George Mikan, lots of championships, they actually sent him a questionnaire, which maybe that's how they did it in those days. And Gibson filled out the questionnaire, sent it back to the Lakers. The Minneapolis Lakers, never heard from them. And he said, if they had offered me a contract, I would have signed with the Minneapolis Lakers to play in the NBA, and I would have never played professional baseball. So it's so weird how stuff happens. Gibson, to his credit, eventually said, look, I don't know that I would have been an all-star. I think I could have played in the NBA. He was only 6'1", which, 6'1" then and now is not particularly big in the NBA. But that just shows you, to me, what kind of incredible athlete he was, and helped him like a cat off the mound be a great fielder. But the final thing I want to say, in 1961, so this is pre-64, the Great Society, all the civil rights stuff going on. But in 1961, Bill White, Curt Flood, he had the famous lawsuit for free agency, and Bob Gibson got together. And when they had to travel, St. Louis was kind of a racist city back in the 40s and 50s, as were many. We think of the Deep South, but St. Louis has not had a good racial history. But the 3 of them banded together and went to management of the Cardinals and said, look, We want to stay all in the same hotels. We want to eat all at the same restaurants. And the St. Louis Cardinals in 61, according to the reports I read, were the first sports team, the first Major League sports team to kind of break that barrier. And again, that was 3 years before Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society and all the Civil Rights Act. You know, obviously, they were incredibly important. But it was interesting that these three young African-American players in 1961 got together. So Gibson, who later became Joe Torre's coach for a while and had been around baseball, announcer a little bit, eventually owned a well-known restaurant in Omaha where he was born, raised, lived, and died. You know, so he was around a lot, but very outspoken. I think the intimidation that was his reputation as a mean guy, he hated the opposition. He wouldn't talk to them. He said he barely talked to his teammates on game day. And he really had, to me, that intense focus. So I don't think it was a headhunter. Again, you never led the league in hit by pitch, for example, but more intensity, more don't bother me, I'm doing the job. Tim McCarver talks about going out to the mound and Gibson going, just get back. The only thing you know about pitching is it's hard for you to hit it, you know. That's what McCarver said, Gibson said. So again, one of the greatest competitors ever. And the final thing I'll say, 251 wins. Bob Gibson was never a guy who pitched every fourth day. And the other guy I know about more is Whitey Ford, because Casey Stengel used to hold Whitey Ford back for the tough teams. If they were playing bad teams, Whitey Ford wouldn't pitch that last game. So Whitey Ford only had 230 wins. And then when Stengel got fired, Ralph Houck said, I'm giving you the ball every fourth day. And he went 25-7 and won the Cy Young. That never happened. Although Gibson did win 2 Cy Youngs, as you point out. That never happened to Gibson. So when you look at his stats, he never had 40 starts a year, 41 starts a year, which is what you get for 4-day pitchers. And then when they switched to 5 in the late 60s, Nolan Ryan, Tom Seaver, Gentry, Koosman, the Mets, that's what he did mainly. So 251 wins mathematically is almost 300 wins, Carlos. I know you were talking about that. So I've heard some criticisms of Ford and Gibson, but those people just don't understand that these guys pitched against the best teams all the time and never had those easy games that other guys could have got back then. So Bob Gibson, great athlete, intense player, beloved by his teammates, hated by the other team, but a great athlete, a great career, a great man, and he will be sorely missed. This is Steve Callis, speaking of sports, along with Carlos with the K Ortiz. We'll see you the next time.